I'm Rebecca Jarvis, ABC's Chief Business, Technology, and Economics Correspondent, and I want to welcome you today to what is sure to be a really interesting CEO panel. I also just want to thank all of you in the audience right now. I know you are fighting the good fight, making it count against foreign adversaries and others on a daily basis, and I appreciate what you're doing to keep all of us safe and secure. But to our CEO panel today for Fal.Con 2020, we have a distinguished group of guests, beginning with George Kurtz. He's the president, CEO, and co-founder of Crowdstrike. Eric Yuan, the CEO and founder of Zoom, and Stuart Butterfield, CEO and co-founder of Slack. It's great to have all of you with us today. And I think such a timely conversation in this moment where we are all learning to work from anywhere. And here we are connecting with each other in the way that we really only can connect with each other in these days and times over Zoom. So I love that it's very meta that we're going to be having a conversation about all of these things and doing all of it over Zoom as well. To that end, I want to start with you, Eric, because if anyone has defined work from anywhere and made it ubiquitous, it is Zoom. It is your company, the company that you've built. You've been a pioneer in this space. And I wonder, in your mind, what the biggest change has been since March over these last handful of months for you and your business.
I think the biggest change is about the scalability. We never thought about that, from just serving for enterprise customers all the way to serve like all the consumers, like a K-12 schools, all kinds of consumer use cases, right? That is something new, and also that's a big surprise.
How have you been sort of adapting to that whole new world, and how do you think differently about business as a result of trying to reach such a broad assortment of people?
Yeah, I think first of all, we got to stay focused on our company, the culture and value. Our company culture is always to deliver happiness. We got to think about everything from an end user perspective. What we can do more, and also differently to keep delivering happiness to those customers, not only for traditional enterprise customers, also all the consumers, as you mentioned, K-12 schools, and also our company culture is tied to the company value, which is to care, meaning care about the community, customer, company, teammates, as well as ourselves.
Stuart, Slack was created very much in that same mentality that Eric just talked about there. The idea of creating culture, helping communities, connecting to each other in disparate locations. How have you seen these last 10 months shape your company?
I think we're still in the process of shaping it. There was obviously an initial reaction in the early days when everyone started working from home, and a lot of adrenaline and a big surge of usage and things like that. But when we start to actually dig into the policy side and think about if we're going to hire people remotely, we're not going to be able to tell them to move in the future, which means that the company's actually going to have a different shape, and what our office is for and how we're going to make the most of them. It turns out to be like almost a monumental set of changes. And in those changes, I think we're really pushing for opportunities to make fundamental improvements, not just to find the digital equivalent of something that we used to do in physical space, but to try to find ways to do different things or do things differently, take advantage of the latest technologies to change the way that we approach problems and solve them in a different way. All of our customers are looking for those because in the time where there's a lot of change, we get to critically reevaluate the way that we've done everything and look for opportunities to up-level.
When you think about that office of the future, how frequently do you see people going, and why are they going to that office?
We think about unbundling the office, all the different purposes that it serves. And it's a cultural touchstone, and it's a place to host customers, and it's like a projection of power, having a logo on the side of the building. It's all of these different things. And some of the most important are the conversations that happen between a handful of people that have breakthrough potential to solve a problem, or the brainstorming that happens in a conference room. Sometimes the particularly moving all hands or other events. The thing that's least valuable or least important to do in an office is the thing that takes the most square footage, which is housing people who are kind of just sitting by themselves using their computers and not talking to anyone. So if you take that part out, what's the office for? It's for people to come together, to plan, to brainstorm, to kind of align around how they're going to approach a problem. And when they just have a lot of work to do, to generate a big list out of that, they can be in the office, they can be at home, they can be in a co-working space, they can be wherever. And that flexibility, I think, will create not just better lifestyle choices for employees, but because it will force us to create a lot more discipline around communication, I think ultimately be a big improvement to the way we run our companies and to what we can produce.
Well, and speaking to what it will force us to do, Stuart, George, I wonder from your standpoint, it also forces companies to think about security in new ways in this work from anywhere mentality. And I wonder what you're seeing from those who are doing it the best right now, and how companies are thinking through that challenge of making a secure workplace when the workplace is no longer a physical space.
Well, I think if we look at the pandemic, obviously it's a pretty interesting time and it's really impactful in our lives, but I'm always looking to find the lemonade out of lemons. And I think when we look back, we will see a real acceleration in technology and digital transformation. And hopefully that's a good thing that actually comes out of it. And with that sort of acceleration will be security transformation. So as people think about going to the cloud, as they think about using all of these cloud-based technologies, they're going to have security wrapped around it. And as we were helping customers get operational, as they basically took their networks and turned them inside out, and they had 1,000 people outside, and suddenly they had 100,000 people outside their corporate network using Zoom and Slack. All those technologies needed to be secured. So I think it's really just understanding that a security transformation has to happen as much as a digital transformation. And that's just on the technology side. I think Stuart brings up a lot of really good points on how people are going to work, how they're going to interact.
George, have you sensed at all a shift between sort of the more short-term, near-term thinking of March and maybe April and even May to this point where here we are and this is a longer term, not only conversation, but decision-making process?
I think that's absolutely true. I think the first wave of this, the fog of war, it was all about let's get operational. Let's just make sure that companies can actually operate and certainly make sure they can do that in a safe fashion for their employees. Now, I think everyone would probably agree this is more of a sustained campaign, right? You just have to hunker down and figure out how to live through it. And ultimately, we know, like everything in history, we'll get through it, but we just got to figure out the right ways to do it.
Well, and I think one thing you're also getting at is this idea of going from purely surviving to actually thriving in this new environment. And I look at Zoom and CrowdStrike partnering around the NFL draft, and just the idea that now that this is our reality, it's time to kind of make this reality better for people.
I think that's right. It's a bit of a time of war. I mean, people, in the initial shock, you got to get through it, but then you just have to continue living and figure out ways to get better and make things work. And, we know we'll get through it. And for us, working with companies like Zoom on the NFL draft, and you have to have a draft, right? You had to do it somehow. And I think everyone would agree Zoom has changed the world in terms of what we've done over the last 6 months. I mean, we couldn't operate without it. I know Crowdstrike couldn't operate without it. So the fact that they were involved in the NFL draft, I think is really cool. The fact that we were there to help secure it is really cool as well. And, we'll look back on this time and be able to tell our grandkids, we remember when.
Eric, George really gets at the fact that Zoom has become ubiquitous. What changes have you had to make? What things have you had to address in this moment to make this successful?
Yeah, so first of all, I would say we got to understand, what kinds of problem we are facing. We really should understand that. Take, the NFL draft, for example, right? And we have a great, team from George and Crowdstrike, and not only from technology side, but also in the product, and his team help us, right? And we have, their technology, plays a big role to safeguard our user data, and also backend infrastructure is more like the bodyguard, right? So first of all, when we understand the problem, we need to take actions quickly. Who is your partner? Who can help you, right? That's number one. Number two, we got to look at our own product, make sure it's very scalable, right? What if tomorrow there might have another 5 times more usage? Can you survive or not?
Stuart, on your end, have there been any challenges, and if so, how have you guys thought through that in this moment?
The impact of the current situation is very unevenly distributed. So if you're brand new to the workforce, out of college, and the office played a big role in your social life, and you have a very small apartment in the city, you're going to experience it in a very different way than someone who has children who are high school age or grown, and you live somewhere where you had a long commute. Maybe this is a pretty good situation for you. For single parents, it's pretty close to impossible. A lot of people are at their wits' end, let's say, and so ultimately, while those are individual challenges, the challenge for the company is how to support and take care of the employees who are struggling or suffering, still operate the business and deliver to customers, and still feel like you're doing right by the employees who are able to work.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When, in the wake of the George Floyd killing, you sent a very impassioned note to your employees, speaking of stress and influences. And as efforts in both tech companies and around the country have been made in corporate America to be more inclusive and to put diversity in a very real and serious way at the top of their priorities, I wonder what your thoughts are in terms of what technology can be doing and doing more of to help lead that charge.
The technology companies are much more resilient in this kind of economic environment. They've been growing much more quickly. They have many more resources. So I think it's up to us, all the three of us on this call, and many other leaders, to figure out how to take those resources and use them to most effectively support those initiatives or reach those goals. And then on the other side, the use of technology, I think there's still a long way to go in terms of understanding the impact of hiring and compensation decisions, promotions, kind of people analytics broadly. Those technologies are important, but they're not especially sophisticated or difficult. So I think they'll be really widely shared and available to leaders at companies in every industry.
George, how are you thinking about this? Where do you see the opportunities in the tech space to make greater equality, to make diversity and inclusion a more integral part of the model?
I think in general, tech companies, everyone involved needs to do a better job. I mean, I start out with that. And I think doing a better job and getting to the ultimate goal of having a diverse and inclusive workforce kind of starts at the top of the funnel. You have to have a diverse candidate pool. And a big part of what we focus on at CrowdStrike, we have a separate foundation, which is nonprofit, CrowdStrike Foundation. And we've been very active in the college scholarship process, and in particular with certain organization charities like Black Girls Code. So as we think about very arcane sort of areas like Linux kernel engineering, there's just a very small pool out there. So I think it's incumbent on us, and what we can do at CrowdStrike and others in the community, is to allow greater opportunities for people to get involved in these technologies and provide them with things that they need, whether it's tools like laptops or whether it's just opportunity to meet and be exposed to what can be done. I think part of it is if you don't have the exposure, or you're not in an environment where you understand what can be done in a technology company, and it could be marketing, it could be sales, it could be product development. I mean, there's so many things, but if you're not exposed to that, you really don't know. So for us, we try to focus on how to expand the pool, get the best candidates for CrowdStrike, get diverse candidates. I think ultimately we'll be a stronger company for that.
Eric, you have hundreds of millions of daily users on your platform right now. What is Zoom doing to send a message of acceptance, of tolerance, of equality and community to your user base right now?
So first of all, and we got to take a step back, try to understand what's going on. Right, it's very important. That step one is about learning and about what's going on, and that's why not only did I talk with many other CEO friends like George and Stu, we also hired our chief diversity officer and also talk with our employees. You might get a speaker. It's more like a learning session, right? That's a step one. And step two, we got to leverage, our technology, and also like we partner with the Cleveland University in terms of sponsorship of the scholarship and also the internship program as well, right? And also partner with some other organizations, right, to take some actions. That's very important. Make sure we are making a very good progress.
And when you think about that progress and what comes next, what are the new rules of the road? What is your vision of the future for Zoom in the next couple of years?
Imagine a world where four of us on the Zoom call, and guess what? I shake hands with you, I give Stu and George a big hug. They will feel my intimacy. And if you speak even different language with AI, we also can support real-time language translation. I mean, George, when he is getting a cup of coffee, I can enjoy the smell remotely as well, right? That's the world where we are going to live in the future. Not to mention 3D and AR technology. I think that will completely change the way for us to live, learn, and play.
A scratch and sniff Zoom. I really like that. I want to smell the coffee brewing on the other side. Stuart, if I walked into a virtual Slack conference room right now, what would be on the whiteboard for your future?
Oh, that's a good question. Slack Connect, which allows people to communicate across organizational boundaries, so with vendors or customers, partners, is something that's really taking off and accelerating over the last 3 or 4 months. And there's a huge roadmap for that. But the ultimate promise in the context here, I guess, is an improvement in collaboration, an improvement in communication, an improvement in user experience on the one hand, and an improvement in security and compliance. And very often, unfortunately, those two kind of trade off against one another. There's improvements for security that make for a worse user experience, and the user experience goals that people have that result in either less compliant or less secure software or environments. And that's a message that has resonated very well with enterprise customers in particular. The prospect of being able to have that access and control, to be able to hit their compliance needs, to be able to increase the level of security across the organization while improving the means they have to collaborate with customers or partners is pretty huge. So that's one big one. And then I guess very quickly, more broadly, continuing to look at ways to take processes that today must be synchronous. So we must be doing something at the same time and make them asynchronous to create more flexibility in people's schedules and structures to allow us to work remotely without kind of being locked into the same schedule all the time.
George, last question to you on this front. What are the new tenets of this world going forward that are necessary for security and for technology to be successful in this new normal?
Well, I think you have to start with the technologies, whether it's Zoom or Slack, are amazing. We use them all as well as millions of people, but you're not going to be able to operate and use any of these key technologies without security. So we may not have all the sexy stuff that people see in terms of Zoom and enjoy Slack every day, but we're quietly behind the scenes and making sure that everybody can enrich their lives using technologies like these. Think about the proliferation of IoT devices. If you think about all these cloud workloads, CrowdStrike is capable of securing all of those. And we look at it as anything with network, compute, and storage is an opportunity for CrowdStrike to protect that device. So we see a massive opportunity for CrowdStrike and to really be that universal agent to protect all of these different workloads and endpoints and devices that are out there in whatever shape and form. It could even be on a wristwatch in the future. we want CrowdStrike to be silently behind the scenes, making sure that people's digital lives are safe and secure.
As I'm sure so many in the audience who are watching today are working towards that end and that objective every day in their work as well. Thank you so much to all of you, George, Eric, and Stuart. Great conversation. Thanks so much to everyone for joining us for this Fal.Con CEO roundtable conversation, a really interesting one. And best wishes to everyone out there who continues to work hard and fight the good fight.